Okay, it's really good to be here. I was a little bit surprised by the invitation because I've been a graphic designer and art director for 30 years. My material side is on one, my computing side is on another. So when this was like the combination of the two, it's only been in the last year that I've started to play around with mixing the two. So graphic design is changing so rapidly. I'm teaching this semester here, and I've been saying to a lot of people, I think in 10 years, graphic design is not going to be a good name for it. I think right now, the term graphic design is becoming limiting. It's not so much that, human beings, we haven't sprouted antenna, or we don't use telepathic means instead of our eyes. But the tools that we use now, the platforms that our communication skills go out on, that's better. That sounds, this keeps getting kind of weird, but yeah. But all of that stuff is starting to change the rules. So the seniors right now, what I've been saying to them is, the rules are changing in ways that, honestly, being 30 years down this game, I'd like to say that yes, adhere to the rules, but keep them in the back of your mind. But I think even the rules are beginning to change. Some of the principles that we studied as law in graphic design are changing. Again, not because we're growing antennas or because we're changing, but the tools are changing. Computers and a lot of the way we interact. The other thing I said that we need to change to the class is that we need to constantly be adapting. Now, isn't that the name of the game for every industry, keeping up with the latest technology? That's not even what I'm talking about. That goes without saying. Once you guys are out there in the work world, it goes without saying you need to keep up with all the latest things, and that's going to be a job. When I say adapting, I mean forecasting where things are going. You guys, without 30 years of experience, it's going to be a little harder for you to forecast. Me, I can forecast a little easier, but you need to adapt to what you see coming as you get better at forecasting. Now, my peers are not nearly as enthusiastic about all this technology. They really aren't, because technology has made an awful lot of promises. Like we hear. Yeah, it's a joke. But the promises we've watched in yeah, I know I've had a bad relationship with technology. A lot of us have. Because what we know for sure as a promise that technology that we've witnessed happening is that it is eliminating jobs. Okay, and we are seeing it firsthand in technology. It's not saving publishing. Now, are magazines old? I don't know, maybe. We've had things change. Radio is certainly not what it used to be. But the fear of what technology is bringing is becoming very, very tangible. In the world all around us, we are watching fear and nervousness, anxiousness about a lot of the changes. This election, what happened here in this election, was definitely a lot of fear and paranoia. But it's not just here. Brexit, Paris, and Italy, they just had last year things going on in their elections that felt very, very similar to what happened here and what happened in Brexit. Now, it could be aligned directly to politics, but 60,000 march in Poland, white supremacists. Things are getting a little crazy. The pitchforks and the torches are coming, and people have been kind of manipulated into a frenzy. Now, initially when I started this senior semester, and I introduced myself, and I kind of feel like there's something about a good slap in the face that kind of wakes you up and makes you hear things. And so I said to them, it's a great honor, and I take this responsibility tremendously. It's your last semester, as I send you out into the world to be the professional master manipulators that you have been training for 4 years to be. Manipulators. Did he say manipulators? I did. Graphic design, okay, I know plenty of designers in the industry that just like the color pink and this particular font, and that's what they do. But if you are doing graphic design the way graphic design is built to do, we analyze to an obsession who our audience is, and we tweak those elements to get the reaction out of them that we want. We are manipulating them. And the truth is, you guys all know what Citizens United is? I hate to get all political, but graphic designers have moved into politics, and now we're seeing politics get all kind of jacked, regardless of what team you're on, blue team, red team. Manipulation has taken this form, and those billions of dollars in politics go into advertising, marketing, and graphic designers. It's what we do. So I'm starting to study some about social mass conditioning, some that's intentional, some that's not intentional. The NRA. I believe personally, though the IRS sees it as an organization, nonprofit to support guns, I'm not against guns, but I do believe the NRA is part of a PR campaign to keep the American industrial, military industrial complex going. It is a form of social mass conditioning. There are some accidental forms of social mass conditioning that I think as we go forward with social media, we will find that there are principles of social media that have become accidental social mass conditioning in some ways. And honestly, if I wasn't against all the money in politics, I'd be telling all my students, get into politics. That's where the money is. You want to make money? Get into politics, because that's where all the money is. Now, in 1987, I went to this school and graduated, and the one area that I did not want to get into was magazine publishing. 30 years later, it was the bulk of my career. But I actually really, really like now that I was in that industry, because in this industry, we were hit probably the hardest of all media, because the dot-coms when they rose and social media, we were the media group that was sort of the age-old tradition that started to feel the shift of that luxury time where you kick back and you read what you read and you consume whatever information it is that you like. We were the ones being hit most by all these other things. I think it was also the one that felt most true to the graphic design stuff that we learned in school, the type and the image and that whole thing. And it was also when the computers came into the picture, we got to watch that evolution. It was kind of a good place to just be immersed in a really diverse arena. About the time that computers entered into magazines, I started building my own furniture. That door is actually a restroom stall door from the first magazine I worked at. I didn't steal it, it was in the hallway. But this is some of the furniture that I built out of found materials. Completely separate alter ego. By day, I'm a magazine publisher. By night, I'm stalking the streets and dragging things home and turning them into furniture and lighting. And you know what? It was kind of fun. I was kind of getting the best of both worlds. I was getting, again, like I said, I was surprised to get this invitation because I was always keeping the two separate. And it was kind of a nice balance of getting to roll up my sleeves and get dirty and build things. And there's a nice satisfaction. I'm sure a lot of you in architecture know that it's like there's something kind of nice about finishing and completing an object. But it was also nice to be working in this other arena in some collaborative stuff. And it was amazing because when the computer came into the picture for magazines, I could suddenly take on independent projects that I couldn't before because there was an awful lot of upfront cost with typesetting, color correcting. That all had to be sent out. You couldn't do it yourself. And so I couldn't take on so many independent projects. But once I got my own computer, my first independent project was all the collateral on the entire brand identification for a walkathon in Brooklyn that was being sponsored by a nonprofit to raise money for kids for sneakers in Brooklyn. Oh my God, it was brilliant. Everything about this was brilliant. There was nothing bad about it. The technology was, unless you ran one of the big type houses. In New York City, we had 3 or 4 really big type houses and about the same number of places that did all your color separation. I think I was too young to realize what the death of an industry looked like, but that was the first time I saw it. We brought that. In 2018, that very same efficiency and accessibility means that the little junior high school punk who has a Mac and scribbled out a little logo for his uncle who's opening a pizzeria. It went on t-shirts, it went on the sign. They're all really excited. Oh my gosh, he comes running home from school and says, my teacher told me about Adobe Creative Cloud, and I could like get all this software and I could learn, and I want to be a graphic designer. Awesome, that's great. That should be exciting. Except now that kid can put up a website, and though I don't personally go after those kind of places, I have contacts in New York, I communicate with them, jobs are not even listed that I go after. It's just not what I do anymore. But in a lot of these places, in these job arenas, that junior high school kid is now my competition. Now, how much competition could a junior high school kid that's not trained be to a 30-year-old that has been in the business? I'm not 30s, 30 years in the business. Nothing. I could crush him if it's just about the work. Crush him, no question. But there is an area where he crushes me. I know what I need to make, because this is how I make a living. I probably could pull in about $1,200 till I itemize it and break it down. That junior high school kid, $100. Yeah. Let's go out. I'm going to buy something. You are decimating our industry. Now, my point is not like, oh, technology is bad. I love it. I'm immersing myself in it. My point is, though, about the adapting, about the anticipating where it's going. My point is, you can't just keep up with things. The junior high school kids, and you guys who are maybe not a little as annoyed as me about the junior high school kids, how about the ones that aren't even in school yet that are already pretty good with tablets and things? Anticipate before them. Graphic design as an industry needs to go much further forward as an industry. In magazines, when the dot-coms came, we raced around. Social media started slamming at us. Oh my God, we were slapping things everywhere. And then the tablet versions, when they came out, if you haven't seen a tablet version of a magazine, you should. They're amazing. They really are amazing. Wired, I haven't looked at one now, but Wired magazine is not a bad one to look at. But it combines the best of print along with the best of both websites and app interfaces and usability. They're really great. They can have embedded music, embedded video. There was this kind of energy because the magazine industry was starting to spiral down. There was this amazing energy that the tablets were going to save us. And they didn't. If you Google search now, all of the news is, yeah, the tablets aren't saving us, and we're kind of spiraling. Again, why a lot of my peers are not so enthusiastic. And in a lot of ways, I'm sure there's thousands of all kinds of products out there that are brilliant, that would change your life. The newsstand was our forefront in the marketplace, and we did nothing about how we handle the newsstand. We created and we revolutionized our product. But because we didn't go to the marketplace and figure that out, it's dying. Now, as we were hammering away, okay, so my night job when I'm making this stuff, I was hammering away on social media for that, and I was watching what I thought was a growing marketplace. Now, so I'm hammering away more, getting a lot more attention. Now I'm starting to notice that people around the world, because it's global, the internet's global. Did you know that? But that's a joke too. No. But it seemed like this amazing marketplace was rising. It was really amazing and terrific, and it was exciting. And to be getting all this contact and all this fuss and excitement and people calling for images because they're going to run an article and people asking me questions and little interviews, this was all really terrific. It was thrilling. And then this happened. I made the Time Magazine Green Design 100. Okay, well, if one industry, my day job, is dying, my night gig, well, let's rev it up. But the thing I started noticing about this marketplace, and again, the promise of social media, new marketplaces, small business people can grow and develop was, yeah, My press list and my press book were starting to grow at a regular pace, but sales weren't. Well, that's not a very vigorous marketplace. And this promised land of social media, And I think it's also interesting that the very thing that I work in is media. And the media was telling us about the media. Definitely there's a problem. But what I started to discover was in social media, yes, there are buying and selling spaces. Like if you're into collectibles, the whole center place of anything about collectibles, whether you are a collector or whether you are a seller, is the connection of the two people. It was great if you are already in a marketplace that revolves around buying and selling, but I was in a marketplace that was only about like-minded people. Great. So I'm basically running around in a circle of DIYers. DIYers are not going to buy my stuff. DIYers are going to be inspired by what I do, and they're going to go do it themselves. So, I'm a little bit relentless. My friends that know me know this. And I'm still now I'm committed. I've dug my heels in, and I'm not leaving media. But I've also realized that this thing that I do is probably a little more viable than continuing on my path. So I decided, okay, we're already including video into a lot of our photo shoots. So I'm starting to understand the difference between videos on set and still photography on set, and how audio plays into that and the requirements needed. So I decided to create a TV pitch. I assemble a team. This is the teaser for the TV pitch.
From out here, it looks like we can go on forever living like we do. We all know, however, the entire human race needs to make some changes. But doing your part does not need to be a pain in the ass. I know I'm having a great time.
The child coffin, a toy box. This is getting uglier and uglier.
I'm here to teach you all I have learned in the last 2 decades.
If this light bulb breaks in my hand, I'm gonna smack you.
Yes!
Rodney, we're gonna have to hire some people.
I guess that's really a plug.
Wow.
You'll get a peek into my world, my studio, and my circle of friends and designers as we document all of this and bring the whole excursion online and into your living room.
Gisela, would you like to come help? Cheers. Yes.
Right here on Refitting the Planet.
So a TV pilot is a rough idea. The idea of a TV pilot is to sign something with a production company and a network, and this did everything I could have hoped for. When I screened it, I landed an agent in New York City and immediately started talking to production companies. It wasn't until I was inside that industry and starting to look at contracts that I realized the non-scripted television industry was suffering because of what technology was doing and how people were starting to use technology differently and communicate differently. And it just made me crazy. How could the magazine industry be collapsing when in 2018 daily we consumed the same visual consumption as 100 years ago we did it in a lifetime? How is there any visual medium suffering right now? But it was. And so I decided that it was time for much bigger change. I was kind of determined, again, like I dig my heels in and I'm like absolutely going to figure this out. There is no way that graphic design, visual communication, whatever we call it in 10 years, there was no way that there was not a very vigorous place moving forward. But I think at this point I realized it was changing so dramatically that we probably needed to even stop looking at it the same way. Will there be tons of print and all that stuff? Yes, of course, but like that won't, I don't think, be the forefront of the industry. So in this process of making changes, I was talking to my partner and discussing, do we stay in New York? Do we not? New York City had become a billionaire's game, and real estate and space to expand was becoming difficult. Some of my ideas were becoming, I wanted to expand my ideas. I think I was starting to get bored with furniture and lighting, and so I made the big giant decision of giving up my studio space in Bushwick, Brooklyn, the pulse of the arts community in Brooklyn, pack it up, reduce my cost, really pull back, so I could take a little more of an objective view at what was really going on. It's kind of hard when you're driving at 100 miles an hour. You're driving at not that I know anything about that, but when you're driving at 100 miles, of course not. But when you're driving at 100 miles an hour, I mean, you really have to focus. You have to become very myopic. When you're driving 25 miles an hour, you can watch the cows next to you, and you can watch that house next door, and you notice that they painted their door. At 100 miles an hour, you don't see any of that. I knew I needed to pull back and slow way down. So after lengthy discussion, though I'm still holding my apartment in New York, I moved the studio space into Pittsburgh. I had some family clear out some room. I set up right now it's a temporary workspace, but it does what I need because I didn't want to be down as far as being able to work. This was a moment that I needed to really explore a little more vigorously. This was a moment where, in addition to just building my things and whatever, and so I started back and forth between New York and Pittsburgh. It was like this relentless craziness. And I started talking to my peers in New York in media, and then I started connecting for the first time to a lot of people in Pittsburgh. It was interesting because nobody in New York wanted to talk, and you know what, I can't say I blame them. They're all driving at 100 miles an hour. They're like, shh, quiet, I can't, shut up. And I get it, and you're in an industry, everyone's feeling kind of sour about some of what's happening if you're in magazine publishing. I know you're enthusiastic, you're always enthusiastic, I don't want to hear it. But what was really compelling was, when I would connect with people in Pittsburgh, everybody wanted to talk. And not just talk about graphic design or whatever, they wanted to talk about forward thinking. So my first meeting in Pittsburgh was with the resilience team in the mayor's office. And they called me in, they saw the pilot, they called me in and they said they'd like to talk to me because they had felt like they weren't reaching their community well. They did some urban development in a neighborhood called East Liberty. And it sort of left a really foul taste in Pittsburghers. Anytime the mayor's office or places would talk about developing places, they all were like East Liberty. It was just really bad. And it was the very first meeting that I suggested ideas about communicating to their larger city, not using traditional graphic design, and even not using social media. Because when they were describing what was happening, it sounded like the very people that they were not reaching were not on the social media platforms, even though we were told it was. Now, Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council and several other arts organizations met with me. There were two people at the Heinz Endowment that met with me. The guy that co-founded the Entertainment Technology Center at Carnegie Mellon met with me, and we sat and we talked about some thoughts and ideas. It was like bizarre how many people were talking to me here about very forward thinking. Alpha Lab Gear, I have an open door invitation that hopefully I can take advantage of this summer, where I have an office space where I can work, and there's a lot of people developing products there. It's a nonprofit think tank. MonMade is an organization I'm a part of that is part of Bridgeway Capital, a foundation that looks to build business and build jobs with smaller businesses all over Pittsburgh. And Bridgeway Capital is the first place that I just talked to, because my obsession with media kept continuing to grow, and now I want to build a network, because I believe that we have the tools to build a network and let sort of grassroots situations build. Commune is the name of the network, and it was right before the holidays. I just had my first meeting with them about how do you do this? What are the first steps to building a broadcasting network? Now, the thing that I had also started noticing about more and more of my peers, now that I was running about 25 miles an hour and could notice, is everybody still had the big screen TVs, but nobody had cable, a lot of these people that I was meeting, and they were connecting their laptops to their TV, which meant that they were selecting very particularly, probably a lot of you do the same, you're selecting very particularly what you are consuming, what you are watching. HBO, it brought to mind HBO. When it happened, I knew there was a big deal, but when HBO offered streaming, I knew there was bigger media things changing. This is, again, part of that adapting, watching bigger signs. These things mean something. I knew when HBO offered streaming it meant something. When I was at Essence, we watched OWN. We watched Oprah launch that. I remember her in an interview where she was like, oh my God. I mean, she was sweating for a minute. It was really, she was like, you know, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the one that brings me down. Now, it turns out she's doing okay. But it's a billion-dollar industry. I don't think, had she been able to step out to observe how media is operating, I don't think she would have needed to do that. Vice right now, I'm watching the same thing. Now, Vice is still in the, well, will they make it? Will they make it? I don't know. We'll see. Sometimes they do it well. Sometimes, really? And again, I don't think that they need to build these networks in the same way they used to. I think sometimes the reason why industries die is we don't respond to materials. We don't respond to technology the way we need to. Now, with my network, initially I thought, I want to offer this. I want to put this in the hands. I want to kind of create a kind of open source, if you will. And I want to put this in the hands of creatives of all disciplines. And really, I was just thinking about that in terms of marketing because that would put really, really great content, like better, more compelling content on the network. But then I came across this William S. Burroughs quote, and considering how much the human population has been manipulated into this frenzy, I sort of felt like, wow, maybe this is a historic moment for humanity where creatives can have a bigger impact to pull humanity a little bit back from the edge, maybe even just enough that we could talk. And so, based on my Bridgeway Capital meeting, I decided that, you know, let's begin some of the experimentation. So one part of the experimentation was on my own. And you'll see a video clip. It jumps in really loud, so bear with it. But could creative people, could architects, landscape architects, other graphic designers, could you create content without having to become a filmmaker? I don't know. I mean, I've certainly had to learn Premiere Pro, and I'm really into this. I mean, I want to build a network. So I'm diving in. The jury's still out. In the last 2 weeks, I kind of fell off the wagon with my weekly broadcast. And initially, I was kicking myself in the ass about it, but now I realize, no. If you, with all the fire that wants to build this network, just 2 weeks in a row, creatives are going to do the same thing. Apparently, you've had to be a bit too much of a filmmaker, and you couldn't deliver by yourself this. So I'm right now scrambling and backing up to see where exactly the snag-ups happened and if I can polish it out. I mean, I'm shooting these whole things on iPhone 7s. I talked to my film crew and the sound guy for the pilot who we paid real crew for this. Okay, what would you recommend? Microphones to get really good sound that's cheap. I think I boiled my whole, besides the 2 iPhone 7s, I think I boiled my whole equipment cost down to about $300. And so I started shooting these experiments to see if we could boil this down so a network could be given to artists, to creatives, to anyone who wants to create interesting content. And it's now, go. Okay, so maybe this is the 2 weeks that I missed, so that was those. But it's an interesting experiment, and trying to figure out why these 2 weeks kind of fell through is becoming kind of a bit of a challenge.
目で見るだけだったウェブサイトに音声情報をインクルードすることで情報に新しい価値を与え他社との差別
With all those garden hoses that seem to just have fatigued and kink and kink and kink. Those kinky garden hoses. Yes, that's what it is. It's my kinky garden hose project. other projects where as I'm exploring and as I'm pushing forward what I want to do, as I've kind of pulled back the pressure of like produce. This is another part of the series of this thing.
This whole helmet reinvention is the first project of a series, hopefully a series, that I'm calling Archaeological Finds from the Future. This helmet specifically, a piece of survival gear, whether it's respiration, whether it's the atmosphere is blocked out in a way you can't see well, whether it's communication, or all of the above. I hope by showing it as an archaeological find, both communicate the idea that if we don't change our path, if we continue down the road we're going, yeah, sure, we might come up with gear that helps us survive in it, but for how long until we become extinct, before we disappear from the face of the earth altogether? And like I said, this is the first piece in a series of pieces. I've already started collecting the objects I'm going to work with. But I also hope that I can get in here maybe even a pairing of objects where I have the Chanel or Louis Vuitton version or the Apple version that's all slick and beautiful and for the people that have money. But for the have-nots, they have to create this out of an old motorcycle helmet from makeshift parts that they put together with duct tape and whatever, because the economic divide is even a factor now going forward in the human survival.
So the other experiment that I talked about with Bridgeway Capital was the larger broadcasting experiment. And of course, you know, having come out of major media, there are a lot of those billions of dollars that launch networks are to promote, to market. And I thought, well, if we used an inception broadcast model where we got clusters of creatives, whether it's architects with landscape architects and performers and whatever, to work together, and everybody focused all their social media efforts on this one broadcast. And then we created an awful lot of dots, an awful lot of connective tissue where you could follow what you wanted afterwards, that were maybe other content on the network that would maybe work really brilliantly. The Film Follies, we will be broadcasting this year on April 14th from the graphic design department. We are experimenting with this right now. And you know, as my ideas started growing bigger with the media things, now I want to launch my own network. Well, Bill Kinzer used to be a professor here, and he made a comment once that like when design starts to flow very naturally through you, it begins to permeate and go through every part of your life. And so as I was in Pittsburgh, bouncing around in Pittsburgh, you know, my studio there, kind of feeling like I wanted to expand some of the scale of my work, I was noticing an awful lot of these amazing buildings and structures in Pittsburgh that were dead. Social media, social mass conditioning now, when you have these kind of things in a neighborhood, there is definitely a mass conditioning of a city that once was something that's no longer that. And though I have no interest in getting into like urban development, at least not right now, this sparked an idea where these are the projects where I want to get involved in creating something, to developing a message or a communication, that there is power to regenerate some of these things. There is power to repurpose some of these things. The first one is called the Angels Project. I want to take 12 churches in Pittsburgh that have been closed down. There's plenty of them, churches and schools. And I want to scan and program lighting on the inside of the church and also build massive chandeliers inside, kind of coordinating all the lighting to work together. First time ever, I'm actually bringing some of my more digital computing into structures. I've already been in communication with some people at the Heinz Endowment about this project. It's extremely expensive to do 12 churches, but when you scale it down to one, it just doesn't seem to have the sort of community impact over the city that 12 do. And I've already talked to this company in Pittsburgh that has engineered these very compact wind turbines that they're using to power a digital light display on a bridge near the convention center in Pittsburgh. And they said that they thought one or two of them should be able to power, depending on the size of the church, each one of these churches through the city. So That's going to take a while to get to, but now I'm starting to find a place where I can fuse these things together. Now, in the interest of getting started, in this summer it's going to start to really roll, I scaled down some of my ideas. This is called the time machine. The first sketch here is very like a space capsule because that was the initial spark. Some of my sketches now are using a lot of electronic parts, and so when you look straight into it, it'll be kind of translucent, but the object will be solid. But the idea was to punch in a particular year, and using high-speed search engines, plus we would need to program curatorial kind of systems that would only sort out images from a particular year. And if it was possible, and I was just talking to somebody that it might need to be an AI that would learn as it goes along, that we could also make sure that it mixes a bit of good things that have happened and developed along with bad things that have gone down as a kind of demonstration that there is no year that you can go to where it was just euphoric for everyone. And that will be starting to go into construction this summer, and I'm hoping with somebody from CMU that I'll get to start to do some programming with it. But most recently, this doesn't have anything to do with computer programming, but it does have a lot to do with engineering. I just responded to an RFP for Cary Furnace. Cary Furnace is a landmark status blast furnace in Pittsburgh. When Pittsburgh was doing a lot of renovation, they just tore out a lot of their blast furnaces and scrapped it and sold it off. This one grabbed landmark status, and the idea was to use these orange helium weather balloons and orange fabric in here and LED lights to as a kind of memorial to let the molten metal flow again in this old building. And the molten metal is now rising into the sky. The RFP that I responded to, there's no way they have the money to develop this now. But I do also know, and again, part of the forecasting and adapting and jumping ahead, is that I know that they are looking at the possibility of building a museum, a historic museum about the steel industry and about Pittsburgh's history there. And boy, would I love this to be part of the inaugural opening of that. And on that one, there might be some money to make this happen. Now, is any of this graphic design? I don't know. Do I think some of this is graphic design? Yes. Do I think graphic design is the right word for it? No. I do think there will be a new term for graphic design that will encompass a much larger, a much more experiential kind of design work that still is completely about the core element of what we do, communication. I was talking to somebody today about millennials. We know that they like experience. And I do think millennials are probably going to be the first generation as the baby boomers pass. I was a Gen Xer. Yes, there were things marketed to me, but as an industry, the world wasn't marketed to me. The millennials might be the first generation post-baby boomers where everybody has to turn their attention to marketing to. I don't know if it's just the current condition that millennials don't have as voluptuous a job market out there as I did, or if it's actually their character that they want to experience more than ownership. But if that is the character, then I think a shift in ideas that are about experience, probably for an awful lot of industries that can make that shift, is a really, really wise idea. I mean, one of the first orders of business with graphic design is know who your audience is. Now, like I said, my peers aren't exactly thrilled. And part of this whole lecture for me, because like I said in the beginning, I'm kind of new to this, and it's super exciting. I am super aware that I have an awful lot of people that I've worked with for a long time who are not super excited. And then when we watch all the stuff going on in the world, I think that, don't hesitate. Don't hesitate. Keep your feet on the accelerator. But I do think we need to be super, super mindful. This quote, as soon as I can find the right font, is probably going to be tattooed on me somewhere, and probably somewhere where people can see it. I like the aggressiveness, the assertiveness of burning a bridge, but the purpose of this is to light the way forward. And I think some of the new technology might indeed burn a bridge that we can't go back on. But I think to keep ourselves moving forward and to be mindful, to get everybody to pay attention to moving forward, it might not be a bad idea to kind of put an end to some bridges that we can't go back on. Now, again, I hope this whole thing didn't ring like, boy, this man's had a bad relationship with technology. I hope it hasn't, because it's been bumpy. I've just kept my eyes open through the process. I love it. It has evolved my life in many ways, but I have watched death of industries. Time Inc., for those of you that may not even know, a Goliath of American publishing, does not exist anymore. It just died the end of this last year, gone, was bought up by another one. And us gays, let me tell you, when Prop 8 came down in California, we never ever thought, one of the most progressive states in the nation, bam, came down and hit us, and we never thought we could be sideswiped by those that weren't into it. And the EPA, same thing. I mean, my mouth is hanging open with what has happened here with the EPA. We can be derailed easy, so as much as, I want there to be a mindfulness. I don't want this to feel like, wow, he's had a bad relationship with technology. No, I love it. I just kind of want to emphasize, let's keep our foot on the accelerator. Let's be excited about where it's going. Let's work to adapt. Let's work to keep a little bit ahead of the curve. Let's keep industry strong, but let's find a mindfulness. We used to be able to ignore a lot of these fringe ideas. I bet anybody at the EPA is saying, don't ignore them. I know the gay community, the LGBT community is absolutely motivated. We are absolutely focused on Prop 8, things like that. We are not letting this happen again. We were shocked when it sideswiped us. We haven't been paying attention to these kind of things sometimes, and we can get very, very myopic, very 100 miles an hour and focusing just ahead, and we miss so much, and someone can come sideswipe us. I'm just saying, keep your foot on the accelerator, don't get distracted, but really, really be mindful of all these other people, and maybe through communication, maybe through new surges of graphic design, we can actually reach an awful lot of people and come to a table that we can start to mend some of this wild polarization that we're experiencing. But I do think to abandon technology, to not boldly go into it, would be a terrible mistake. That's all I have to say.